Thanks for joining us today with Concurrency as we talk about Semantic Kernel. And today's topic is really about transforming your AI journey with Semantic Kernel. And if you haven't heard of what that is, stick around. You'll hear a little bit about what it is and how it can help your business. But before we get started, quick introduction. My name is Brian Hayden. I'm a solution architect at Concurrency. Here's the QR code for my LinkedIn. If you want to reach out to me and connect at some point, love to hear from you and talk about some of the technology problems that you have. I like to say that I have like the greatest job at Concurrency. I get to play around with some of these cool tools and talk with a lot of customers out there that are trying to figure out how to use AI. So today what we'll be talking about is Semantic Kernel. What's on the agenda? Let me explain it to you. This is definitely a 100 level course. What it is, why you should be thinking about using Semantic Kernel in your development cycle. How do you go ahead and get started with it? And then I've got a couple of practical use cases and maybe a fun one too, like near and dear to my heart as well. But before we start on that agenda, let's just talk a little bit about technology. We talk about this in terms of framing the AI journey and where technology has been really accelerating that growth, over time. Here you can see this chart. Technology has generally been thought of to, really increase productivity and productivity growth. People talk about the printing press as being, something that was great, that really brought knowledge to a lot of individuals. But you can see it really didn't have a lot of effect on productivity growth, and neither did steam engines for that matter. But as we started to get into the 2000s, we had more things like the internet came around, smartphones came around, AI is now the new technology. And here's where you're starting to see some of the massive productivity gains, for the country and for the world, really. But within this AI journey, there's a couple of different contexts. On the one hand, you've got commodity-based AI. So this would be like your Microsoft Copilots, things that are enabling individuals to work with AI in the tools that they use. And then you've got more mission-driven. And mission-driven are typically custom-built applications or leveraging tools that can do something that's meaningful and developed specifically for your business. Things like supply chain forecasting, elements like that. And to illustrate this a little bit further, you can see kind of like this commodity versus mission driven as being how accurate and precise. At the very top, you've got like your Microsoft Copilots. Really, it's about just worker productivity. That's like the general web Copilots. And then you've got your Microsoft 365. So how am I going to write a faster email? What about generating PowerPoint content? I've got some really great stories about how I've been able to put together a full presentation, not this one. It took me longer than 30 minutes, but I've been able to put together a full presentation and gone out and talked in front of 100 people, and just took me, 30 minutes, 45 minutes to get a presentation done. Then you start getting into like the semi-custom space and the custom ML. And this is where the mission-driven, elements of AI really start to manifest themselves. Sometimes you're using pre-built AI models. Sometimes you're creating your own custom models. But you also have to have a way to be able to interact with these. On the more commodity side of it, you've got Copilot Studio, which is a Power Platform enablement that allows you to interact with LLMs and other models to get work done, but in a low-code fashion. What we're going to be talking about today is similar to that. We can use custom models. We can use out-of-the-box models with Semantic Kernel. So what is Semantic Kernel? Semantic Kernel really is just a lightweight framework. It's open source, provided by Microsoft, and it's designed to help developers create applications and agents leveraging AI components without having to do all the fussy, messy work of marshaling all this, all the reasoning and actions, together. So it allows you to, it's really an orchestration component that brings all the different components of this together. And what does it really look like? So with Semantic Kernel, you're going to have your application leveraging Semantic Kernel. Semantic Kernel is going to have plugins or other agents that it interacts with. And those plugins and agents can all interact with other AI applications like Azure's OpenAI service or the OpenAI as ChatGPT itself. You can use all these different components together as part of Semantic Kernel to build a smart, intelligent application, for your company, your organization. And why would you need it? Really, when we start talking about Semantic Kernel, we're talking about some of the more advanced functions of AI. And in this context, we're going to think about agents as the foundation of like complex AI. So I've got kind of like a wilderness theme for those of you that know me or those that you don't. I'm a big outdoorsman. I spend a lot of time out in the woods. So we're going to be talking a lot about this wilderness theme. So I've got a task, and I want to plan a 2-week backcountry trip out to Idaho. Never been to Idaho. My niece lives there. She says it's beautiful, but I want to go in the remote wilderness. What are some of the things that I would have to do in order to plan this out? I probably want to take a look at the weather, what the conditions are going to be like. What am I going to need to bring along with me? What kind of tools do I need? How am I going to survive out there for 2 weeks? How much food do I need? What kind of routes am I going to take to get from point A to point B? What are my options? Am I going to have access to water? Does it have, what happens if something goes wrong and I need to get out of there, evacuated? Is there an easy exit strategy for me? And this is what agents can do. So with AI agents, what you're doing is you're asking the agent to plan this trip for me, and you're relying on it to figure out all these different components, in order to have a successful trip. And we've also evolved, agents over time. In the early days of computing, we were doing basic automation. We'd write, jobs or scripts that could, get certain tasks done. And then we started to get a little bit more automated with this and a little bit more intelligent. We started using RPA, like UiPath or other elements. But now we're looking at this like, new AI world that allows us to do many other things. LLMs like chat assistants were the thing that kind of sparked all this creativity about 2 years ago. And now we're harnessing that energy of the LLM chats and building agents out of them. So that's where we are today. Agents can be strictly language like chatbots, or they could be multimodal where they're interacting with images. And you can even have multi-agents. And all this is to prep us for more autonomous agents and replicating agents in the future of AI that we still don't know what it looks like today. So what are these agentic patterns? They're really acting as like personal assistants for you to accomplish some sort of larger, more complex task. We talked about trying to plan a trip out to Idaho. That's something that I would probably spend weeks, planning out. And I'm not going to build a chat agent or a AI agent today that's going to, reduce that from 2 weeks. I'm probably going to get pretty nervous about it. But they can use a bunch of knowledge from a bunch of different sources and help you actually come up with something that's more well-reasoned, and even just give you ideas of the things that you should be thinking about and how you're going to formulate your plan. So they, more formally, they take actions. They have memories that you can respond to some of the suggestions it has. They can do planning. Agents orchestrate different elements or different subagents. And they're, like I mentioned, they're very event-driven and they're interactive. That allows you to be able to say, plan this trip for me. And then it says you need, I don't know, 6 bags of tapioca pudding in order to survive. And I'm going to question it and say, I think I probably need some chili because it's got more protein. And it'll adjust to that, and it'll give you new recommendations based on that. Most of you have already been using ChatGPT. You understand, I didn't like that response. Can you try again, but do this other thing with it? When you develop agents, you're going to get those kinds of feedback elements, and you're going to be able to respond to those in kind. So how does it all work? How am I going to actually use it? So there's several main components that we're going to talk about. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into as part of this conversation. And at the very center of it, you've got the kernel itself in Semantic Kernel. And then you've got all these different components that are orchestrated together. So we talked about the agent framework. There's a plugin framework. You can adapt to a bunch of different AI services. There's ways to store the data. There's ways to help the agent do planning. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about personas. This is something that personas specifically is something that not a lot of people are talking about. And we've actually been driving a lot of conversations around that here at Concurrency. Being in the software development field for most of my career, UX and the way that computers interact with individuals is really super important to me. And personas, really kind of follow a UX, type of discipline. So let's start at the top. What is Semantic Kernel? So I said it's basically a lightweight framework, and the kernel itself is really, if you're thinking about it from a developer's perspective, it's really just a dependency injection container that you can interact to be able to bring all the different components together as part of your application or as part of your agent. It's the heart, Semantic Kernel. And, if you want to think of it as kind of like a trusted compass, or your backpack, that you're going to load up a bunch of gear into. It helps you manage all the different essential tools, for working with different AI agents. So it's going to select the optimal path. It is going to build your plan, as you make requests to it. It's going to initiate the journey and help you interpret the results. What is the feedback from the user? What are some of the changes that are going on as part of this interaction? And finally, you get the treasures that are going to be returned to you. So it gives you gives your application all of its findings and its reasoning to make sure that you're successful on this expedition. So AI services are definitely a big component of this, because without those services, you're just going to have generic interactions. So one of the big things about Semantic Kernel is that it's not Microsoft centric per se. It now is currently supporting Mistral. It's supporting OpenAI. ChatGPT, you can incorporate Hugging Face models, and even Google AI is all part of what it has to offer. But the different AI services are going to do things like text completion, chat completion. So think of how you would interact with ChatGPT. But it also has a bunch of different more experimental things that you can play with. So text to image, image to text, text to audio, audio to text. These are all things that you can incorporate into your agent as you include different services. From a code standpoint, it's as simple, like I said, this is a dependency injection framework. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a new Hugging Face model using the kernel to keep track of the different services that it has. Now, from a future perspective, this is great because, while I might be using ChatGPT 4.0 today, what about when ChatGPT 5 comes out, or a different, a new service that comes out? So in this kind of model, all you're really doing is registering services that you're going to be using. You can switch them out. You want to develop your own custom models, you get a new iteration of it. This framework and dependency injection is going to allow you to go ahead and remove or replace that AI service with something that's more impactful or meaningful or performs better given the use cases that you have. However, not without some caveats here in terms of how you can use it. You can see on the chart here that I provided for you that C Sharp's kind of the major supported framework in Semantic Kernel. You certainly can use it with Python and Java, but you can see that as Microsoft makes investments into the framework, that they're doing that in C Sharp first, and they're bringing along Python and Java, for the ride as they mature. So next, let's talk about the agent framework itself. The agent is the interaction aspect of it. This is where the questions kind of come through. So they're kind of like seasoned adventurers, that have their own unique set of being able to respond to things. Your high level agents are, probably going to interact with lower level agents. I've got some examples of that. But agents can come on a couple different flavors. So you've got your typical chatbots, that help, answer questions or share information. It's kind of like, a way for you to interact with all the different maps and journals that you've collected over the years. For your company, it'd be, interacting with your company documents, asking questions and finding information about it. And then there's more like co-pilots. So these are assistants. These are like the explorer that's walking next to you, assisting you with, different tasks, like help me build a fire, things along those natures. So they give you suggestions that you can, accept and modify and work with. And then there's the fully autonomous agents. So autonomous agents are starting to come to fruition, especially in the manufacturing space as it responds to events in the real world. These are essentially tireless explorers that are just waiting for something to happen so that they can be helpful on your journey, in the wilderness. And they don't require any input. They can make decisions and perform actions on their own. Plugins, we talked about plugins, as maybe sub-agents or, more specialized tools. But I like to think of them as the tools that you put in your backpack as you're going on this journey, right? If I'm going to be out in the backcountry for 2 weeks, what are some of the critical things that I'm going to need? Definitely need a compass, probably going to need something to chop up some wood, maybe clear some brush or clear a trail. Don't want to leave home without, a first aid kit in case something happens out there. I can take care of myself. But they really are the specialized tools. The plugins, are there to actually perform very specific tasks. And when we get into some of the examples, you'll sort of understand that. But the kernel is going to have knowledge about your plugins. With the dependency injection, you just register your plugin, and you let the semantic kernel engine figure that out. How to use it, when to use it, and it keeps your hands free, to be able to do the more meaningful tasks. How does this work? Is a concept of planning or a concept of planners. Imagine you're on this really long adventure and you've got a task that needs to get done. I want to build a campfire. Well, how would you go about doing that? First off, you're probably going to want to assess the situation. Like, is it dry outside? Is it wet outside? Is it safe for me to build a fire? What about the location? Am I restricted to be able to access that? Then you're going to have to gather materials. You're going to have to choose a location, prepare the fire pit. All this requires planning. And if you think about each one of those steps as being an agent, the planner as part of semantic kernel is what actually communicates between those different steps. So semantic kernel introduced the idea of planners, was like the first to really introduce that concept, and it's now been adopted as part of some of the other more popular frameworks. OpenAI introduced a new technology called, function calling, and now Gemini, Claude, Mistral, they're all using, some sort of, planning or function calling that allows information to be shared between the different agents so that it can accomplish the task. We did talk about personas, and when you think about personas, there's a couple different ways that you can think about it. I like to start at the UX part first. And for me, how a user is going to interact with your agent is very important. So you give them the information that's most relevant to the type of question that they're going to ask. And often that starts with, proper UX, in identifying the different types of users. So sticking with the explorer theme, I've got a team of people that are marching out, into the wilderness. Who are the different people that I'm going to have along with me, right? So I've got a navigator, and when I define that persona for my agent, the navigator is going to want very precise and detail-oriented answers, right? He's trying to ensure that the expedition stays on the right path. But the scout, he's got a different set of requirements. He's alert, he's cautious, he's responsible for jumping ahead of everybody, making sure that the path is safe, that there's no dragons, on the other side of the mountain that are ready to spit fire. Definitely want to have a medic. Medic, I want them to be, very calm and supportive. I don't want them to get freaked out if, somebody has an accident. And your leader, your explorer, like he's going to be confident and decisive. So all these are different ways that would manifest itself in how you direct the agent through prompt management. And by thinking about this, you're going to have a well-defined agent that's going to be able to give people the answers that it wants in a way that makes it feel comfortable for them. Um, Another concept that we talked about was the vector stores. So in the world of AI, we hear about vectors and vector databases. Essentially, what we're talking about is storing information or gathering information for our AI agent to be able to use as part of its response. So, imagine that you're, going on this big trip. What are some of the information pieces that you'd want to grab with you? You're probably going to have a topographical map. You're probably going to have a trail map. You may have, collected some weather information so that you have an idea of what to expect over the next few days. And use your compass to sort of navigate between, to supplement these maps and help you figure it out. So in the world of semantic kernel, vector stores are kind of like your map rooms. And they're really essential for, you to navigate the complex, terrain such as NLP or custom vision, computer vision, and recommendation systems. So just as you would like store maps and notes and coordinates to help find your way, the vector store holds that information about different topics, different keywords, facts, opinions, and sources that would be related to your journey's goals. And then we have memory, and complementing some of the vector stores, vector indexes, talking about the Microsoft offerings, we've got Azure Cosmos DB, Postgres, Cassandra, and certainly AI search. It's important to think about which ones are better for your specific use cases. There's a variety of reasons why you would choose one over the other. Some of them are more simple to use, some of them more expensive to run, and having a proper place to store your memory is important for this journey. So let's think about some of the use cases. I'm going to start with a fun one to illustrate exactly how all this kind of comes together. So let's say that I want to go fishing on Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan's a very big lake. For those of you that might not be in the Wisconsin area, it gets dangerous really fast. And sometimes you're going to be 4 to 5 or even 10 miles offshore. So not similar to like being out in the open water in the ocean, right? So I'm going to create a fishing agent. And what are some of the things that I need to do in order to make this work? So my agent is going to, be defined. I'm going to have personas that that are going to define how I want to interact with it. Are you the captain? Are you a passenger? What are the different people that you would interact with? With your agent. The agent's going to be responsible for determining what is the journey going to look like for you. What's the plan for this fishing trip? And then it helps to orchestrate that plan through all the different plugins and agents that you're going to be using. And finally, it's an engagement mechanism, for the user. So when you think about how to build your agents, one of the things that you can do is just think about what are the different steps that you would want to do in order to accomplish this goal, building a campfire, going on a fishing trip. So for me, being an avid fisherman, what are the things that I do when I go on a fishing trip? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is check the weather. Is the lake going to be safe? Are there storms coming into the area? And you create a weather agent that's going to be able to collect that information, check the forecast, and help give that information back to the fishing agent so they can determine what are some of the correct things to be planning for. I need to know about the fishing regulations in that area. Are there any changes to the regulations? How many fish can I catch? What kind of equipment can I be using? And that I can share with the gear agent, which is going to tell me what is the checklist of different gear options that I do have. What about safety equipment? What about other supplies that I might need when I'm out on the lake? Like, flares or life vests, things along those nature. And then obviously I have to have a route. I'm going to get from point A to point B. Point B is going to be wherever the fish are. How do I actually navigate the waters to be able to get there? I have to go through a marina. There's channels for me to go to. There might be restricted zones that I can't go through that I have to be aware of. And then finally, like once you've built these plugins, you have to have the knowledge, for the agent to be able to answer that. So some of the things that I thought about in this particular use case would be like fishing reports. I'd want to collect those and be able to, leverage other people's more recent experience. What are the different fishing techniques? What kind of fish can I expect to get out there? And how would I actually present, lures to them that would make sense given the current lake conditions and all that other information. So these are the major components of how you would build an agent in Semantic Kernel, and these map directly to some of the concepts that we went through before. So let's use something a little less fun and more business oriented for the people here that joined, for that aspect of it. But I'm going to stay with the camping theme. Help me find a new tent. I've got an e-commerce store, and how am I going to go ahead and pick a tent for a customer? So here we've got an orchestration agent. Again, we've got a persona. We've defined that agent's persona to help this particular consumer. And it's going to do a product recommendation. So it's going to figure out all the different things that it needs to do to figure out which tent that this user is going to want. And so if I was, a customer service person sitting at the outdoor store and a person came to me and said, I want a tent, what are some of the things that I would need? What are some of the information pieces that I would need in order to serve that customer correctly? I might want to ask them, what experiences do you have? What kind of history have you, bought from us before? Do you like higher end or lower end gear? How often do you go out in the wilderness and experience these things? I also need to know what's available. Do I have this in stock? Are you going this week? Are you going next week? Can you wait? And I'm going to make decisions based on that. So I've got an availability agent. And then I've got, a bunch of customer reviews. What have other people with similar experiences felt about the product that they bought? And that would help give me advice to that customer, and so that they, would feel good about this purchase. And then what are other people saying about it from a social media standpoint? So all these are different components that are going to feed into the recommendations that I'm going to serve back to the customer. And then I need to have the knowledge behind that. So how am I going to, pull this information together? Product knowledge database, sales history, inventory data, equipment data. All these are different components that are going to feed into that. So that is what an agent looks like. And in terms of next steps, first off, I know it was kind of a brief, sort of webinar to introduce this, to everybody. Hopefully you found this really helpful. If you have any questions, I'm going to stick around for a little bit, so feel free to throw some questions in the chat. But if you want to talk a little bit more about Semantic Kernel, I'd love to, meet with you and your organization. We can interact in a couple of different ways, but we are offering a complimentary AI readiness workshop. These are a lot of fun. We talk to customers about what are some of their objectives and goals around AI. And then also, if you want to learn a little bit more about AI agents and see how they actually work, we've got a couple of demos that we can do, maybe walk through some use cases, for your organization, working with me or some of the other architects on my team. Um, Hope you guys found this informational, and let me know if you have any questions. We have a question. How many agents are available out of the box in AI Studio or the like, and how many do you have to construct? So agents are essentially mostly custom in terms of the interactions they do. There's AI services, I think maybe would be, I could answer this in two different ways. So the difference between AI services are the models themselves, but the agents themselves are doing things that interpret the information, and provide a reasoned result. So they typically have a little bit more to it. Um, think of an agent as being like, having a prompt that's associated with it. And I am trying to get this thing out of this AI model. In terms of the number of services, AI services that are out there, um, if we go back to the slide that I had that had a list of the different services that are supported, there's Google, Hugging Face, Chat, OpenAI, and Azure's OpenAI services. So anything that's hosted there would be available to you. So, I mean, like literally thousands of models when you start thinking about Hugging Face. In terms of the agents, those are mostly going to be things that are going to be important to your special use case. So I think that, think of it that way. I hope that answers your question. Um, so Semantic Kernel absolutely helps with the creation of agents. So let's go back and take a look at one of the slides that has some of the code on here. Um, so here's what a typical agent would look like. A very small, lightweight agent. I'm essentially using the kernel to interact with it. I've registered my services, and all I'm really going to do is, essentially collect the requests and process it through the different components of my agent. Um, so you register, as part of like your main, if you want to think of it that way, you're going to register all the different components that were part of this, like register the agents, register the plugins, register the AI services. All those are going to be relatively single lines of code. And that you can use to basically say, these are the tools that I'm putting in the backpack. And then I can ask the backpack to help build me the fire. Um, and so how it does that is through the planning mechanism, which is way more complicated than I can explain in a couple of minutes or a couple of sentences. But think of it as they're sharing information, and it'll help you figure out like what are the things that you need to do. So when I ask my agent to build me a campfire, it knows, or it's aware, that I have access to a kindling agent and a spark agent, and it's going to figure out how those pieces need to interact with each other in order to give you the correct answer. So semantic kernel in a lot of ways is an orchestration engine. Great questions. Uh, I'm going to do a follow-up, maybe in another month on this one, where, or maybe one of the delivery, one of our architects here too, where we actually do like a live demo, actually build one in real time. But that's something that, be happy to do, Pete, for you if you want to reach out as a follow-up. We can do a session for you and your organization as well. And as far as the developer interface, this is all built into Visual Studio, is available as NuGet packages, and Visual Studio Code. All right. Well, once again, thanks a lot for your time. Hope you found this helpful, and we'll talk to you soon.